How nice to see everybody. How nice to be here. I'm so glad to be invited. Thank you so much, Patricia and Jessica, for having me here. And thank you, everybody. Thank you, band, and for the music. Thank you, everyone. Such a beautiful day to be here. Such a beautiful place to be. Here we are. I just wanted to say, I've been a practitioner at Agape for a few years, and prior to that, still I'm a professor and I teach university international politics, and usually I teach for transformation and raising consciousness, and so it fits perfectly with spiritual study and seems important. I came to Agape, and I came to even a spiritual path after a long time of not being on one. So I grew up in a Pentecostal home. My father is a minister, a missionary. Both sides of my family, missionaries, all God, all the time. And but it was a pretty particular version of God. And I said to myself, I'm out of here. And so I wandered for a long time. I won't tell you how long, because then you'll know how old I am. But for a long time I wandered. I think in the Bible it talks about riotous living in the far country. So riotous living in the far country means just far, far away from God consciousness, and far, far away from the truth of who I really am and my divine nature. And so, not surprisingly, I was kind of miserable and having a hard time. And I would say the misery most that I experienced is that life just seemed so hard. It seemed so hard to keep this together. It seemed so hard to get everything I needed to do done. It just seemed so hard and challenging. I was so weary by the time that I got to Agape, and I was weary of thinking that I'm separate from God. Tired of thinking that I'm separate from everybody, really, walking through the world as though I'm a radical individual, separate, monadic, self-contained, and it's not going to work out unless I do it. It's not going to happen unless I make it happen. And so that's one of the masks that we wear. It's the mask of the human condition, we could say, to think of ourselves as separate, to think of ourselves as separate from God, and separate from something greater than this, right? We get fooled into imagining that this is all there is, and that we're separate from the world of good. If we get any good, it's because we work hard and struggle to get it, and even fight with others so that we have it, yeah? And so that's a mask of separation, and we share it, human condition, right? So it takes the sting off it a little bit. It's not our individual doing so much as we're just born into this circumstance, right, that has us imagining that we're separate. And so we walk around in this disguise, this mask of separateness, and this is kind of how we see ourselves as separate, and then we see each other as separate. And so there's a separation from God, there's a separation from each other, and then we experience a separation from our own selves, from our own creativity, from our own divine impulse, right? Because when we say we're separate from God, or we think we're separate from God, we're really saying that we're separate from our own spiritual nature, that we're separate from our own soul mission here on the planet. Because there isn't a God out there, yeah? It's the indwelling presence that we're talking about. And so we do suffer some malaise. We suffer from a disconnect, and we experience that. It shows up in so many different ways, right? Our separation from our own selves shows up as boredom. It shows up as depression. It shows up as self-loathing. It shows up as inertia or lethargy or just an inability to find our happiness, to find a way to be happy. That mask of separateness keeps us quite separate. It shows up too, we're born into this human condition thinking that we're separate, and we wear that mask, and then, the institutions that we have created come from that same consciousness of separateness. And so we've gone to elaborate means to create ways to keep us separate, and I would say that gender, the idea that you have a masculinity and a femininity that are absolutely oppositional and rigidly defined and separate from each other. We say things like men are from Mars and women are from Venus. We create a separation, even a planetary separation, right? And then we say, everybody now, get together. Couple. Have a happy life. Well, good luck to you. The setup is really a setup of separation and separateness, and we see that played out. If you watch television, if you watch any sitcoms, right, where there's a man and a woman couple, there's a central conflict that's always taking place, where there's some sneaking around, there's deception, there's trying to fool each other, there's trying to get things from each other rather than a compatible relationship. That's the setup of gender separation. And we're kind of socialized to want to do that well, right? We're socialized to want to do our womanhood well and do our manhood well, but right at the center of it is a profound separation. We've also institutionalized that mask of separation in race and racial categories worldwide, in fact. The whole world has been mapped according to racial categories that posit an essential difference, an essential and biological difference, that our outward appearance signals something inside of us that is profoundly different and profoundly separate. It's in our blood, it's in our lineage, right? And we grant a lot of importance, frankly, to those kinds of separations. We do that in nations as well, right? We determine that there are physical boundaries and territory, there are certain populations that are distinct, and that cultural difference is somehow tied to some essential separateness, right? No wonder we have the world that we have. It's not a mystery how that's happened. So that mask of separation, it has a lot of impact, right, on how we live, and that institutionalization of it keeps us convinced that there's something true. There's something true about our separateness. All the while, we're suffering from our this lack of connection that we have with our own selves and with each other. We have trouble on the planet because of that. So that's one mask, right? I'm going to tell you about a few masks, but that mask of separation, I think, is a crucial, essential one to just come to terms with, and to really know that it is made up, that it is socially created, that it is relative. It's a relative experience. In the mind of God, there's only one. In the mind of God, there's only one thing going on. There's only one life, and we are each expressions of that one life. But there is no innate, essential difference between us. There's only one cosmic life force, and here it is showing up as each of us, showing up so beautifully as each of us. So, the mask of separation. There's another mask that we wear. That's the mask of finitude, that we're finite beings, that we're mortal, yeah? There's the mask of the idea that we are finite beings, that we're born and we die, and that's it. That's it. Whatever we do in between, we do it, whatever it is. But we have we have an expiration date, yeah? And that mask of finitude, right, is, we would say, the lie of death. So there is a physical passing, right, from this finite existence. There's a physical passing, and I hear that it's a guarantee that thus far everybody has passed. So, okay, we'll take that. But the fact is that we come into this existence already existing. We have a soul life. We have an eternal life. And we show up here as those eternal souls. We have a physical, three-dimensional experience, and we pass from here, but we remain who we are. We remain our essential souls. And so that idea of death is a lie. And that lie of death comes with, then, fear of death. Yeah? So we make up a lie. We're going to die, and this is it, and we're finite. And then we're afraid. We're afraid of our own lie, okay? That's funny. That's odd, yeah? It's a trick that we play on ourselves, right? The idea, how many times have you said something like, oh, I'm merely human. I'm just human, or they're just human, right? It's just assuming that this is it. This is all we are, and we're finite by our very nature. There is a lot of profit made from our fear of death. Yeah? There's a lot of industries built around our fear of death. And there's a lot of habits, I think, that come from our fear of death and our mask of separation, both. Just think consumerism, for instance, massive, rampant consumerism as a way to land here and establish who we are and feel a connection and feel some kind of satisfaction and stave off our demise, basically. There's a lot of ways that mask of finitude plays out. But the fact is, we're eternal beings, and we can't be hurt, we can't be harmed, we can't be injured, right? And this part of our existence is just that. It's this part of our existence. It's a human experience we get to have. So that's the mask of separation and the mask of finitude. Both of those, the mask of separation and the mask of finitude, really establish ourselves as limited beings, yeah? We have limited lives and limited connection and limited capacity and et cetera, et cetera. And so the other mask that we wear is the mask of unworthiness. Okay? There's another trick, right? Because we've made everything up that I've said thus far. That we are limited beings, and now we feel unworthy. Well, of course. We've established that we're limited. And so that mask of unworthiness, right, that establishes and that repeats itself in all of our institutions, in all of the ways that we're socialized. Even unworthiness shows up in terms of how well we do our gender, how well we perform our gender roles. It's actually very hard to be an ideal woman. I don't know if you're aware of that. But it is. It's very hard to keep up with the ideal of what it means to be a woman, because it's quite contradictory, and it's quite paradoxical, and it's quite asking us to be all things at all times, and yeah? Okay. We can see that. And so it's easy to feel unworthy, isn't it? It's really easy to go straight to unworthiness. I'm not doing my gender well. I'm not doing my social role well. Somehow or another, I am not fulfilling this thing that I'm meant to fulfill. And somebody somewhere seems to think that there's a way to do this. Yeah? Yeah? And so unworthiness is a mask that we wear. The reason it's a mask, it's a disguise, is because we are whole. We are made whole. We're made perfect. We come straight from the mind of God. This is divine design showing up as each of us. This is a pattern of perfection that shows up as each of us. And this is not earthly perfection, yeah? The earthly perfection, the standards we have there, those are relative. This is in the mind of the absolute. In the mind of the absolute. It's an absolute idea of perfection and completion. And nothing that happens to us here changes that. Yeah? Nothing that happens in this earth experience changes the fact that we're whole and perfect and complete. We come in with that and we leave with that. We take it with us because it's qualities of our soul. Yeah? So part of this spiritual path that we're on is to live from our souls. Yeah? It's to live from the truth of who and what we are, made in the image and likeness of God, made in the image and likeness of the entire cosmos, right? We're here to live from our soul, from the truth of who and what we are, from our authentic selves. And part of how we can start to do that is to become really aware of the fact that everything that I've said so far is made up. Everything is relative about our earthly identities. It's socially constituted. And when we look at certain systems like gender or race or nation, those systems are made up and capitalize on our human condition, sense of separation, in order to govern us, right? We're very easily governable, yeah? If we know our rightful place, right? If we think we know our rightful place, right? We're socialized so well that we don't need people to come and tell us how to be a woman or how to try to be a woman. We start to do it ourselves, police ourselves, right? Or to be a man, or to be whatever, a citizen, a business person, whatever social role we're talking about, right? We police ourselves. Our sense of unworthiness is like the police, right? It sets standards for how we should be, and then guess what? It always finds that we fall short. Right? So we get up the next day, and I don't know how many of you do this, but today I'm going to do better. Every September since I was 5, I have said that this year I'm going to be a better student. This year, this day, right? And so it just keeps us in that cycle, right? That mask of separation keeps us in a cycle of war, for instance, and poverty on the planet. The idea that we're separate from each other makes it possible for us to go about our lives and let a whole bunch of people suffer, right? For us to go about our lives and imagine that war is necessary or inevitable. For us to go about our lives and think that, yeah, we need to build walls around our borders, right? Because we're separate. And that all that exists in the rest of the world, right, is other beings who are also separate, who are also finite, who are also limited. Yeah? So it's about how we see ourselves, but it's also about how we see everybody else, right? If we know ourselves to be one with God, one with the cosmos, one with that one life, then we can see that for everybody else, right? And then now we start to be ambassadors of peace. Okay? So these masks that we wear, as I've been saying, they come to us, right? It's not an individual blame, right? So the first thing that we want to do is really, well, the second thing, the first thing was know that this stuff's made up. The second thing is to really understand that it's a misunderstanding, right? To have compassion for the misunderstandings. We've just made mistaken assumptions about who we are. We're suffering from a profound case of mistaken identity, our own. But it's a misunderstanding. We have misunderstood our true nature. We have misunderstood the purpose of our lives here, which is to live from our souls. We have misunderstood everybody else, right? It's a profound misunderstanding of who we are as the one life. And so we want to see it as a misunderstanding and forgive, right? Forgive your own self for the misunderstanding. So on a spiritual path, very often, spiritual people are hard on themselves, right? Are a bit unforgiving and think, oh, I'm a spiritual person, I should be better than this, right? So we want to be a bit kind. We want to be a bit forgiving and understand the misunderstandings that we make about our own selves, that we make about other people, yeah? And forgive everyone, in fact. All the time. I think there's occasion for that. Everywhere you go, there is occasion to forgive everyone for everything, all of the time. That's it. So not only ambassadors of peace, but now we're walking in the vibration of forgiveness, right? Doesn't that change everything? That changes everything. It really does. Yeah. So, there's a scripture I want to just quote to you. It says, "Fear not, for there is nothing covered that will not be revealed, and hidden that will not be known. Fear not, for there is nothing covered that will not be revealed, and hidden that will not be known." And so, what is it saying? It's saying a whole bunch of things, but I'll tell you one way to understand that. What it's saying is that the more we walk in truth, the more we walk in God, the more we walk in a conscious awareness of who we really are, the more anything that is unlike God is revealed. Anything that is unlike love shows up. Anything that is unlike oneness comes to our attention. Anything that's an expression of separation starts to be laid bare, right? We lay things bare by telling the truth about who we are, by shining the light of awareness on our own selves and the world in which we live. And everything that is unlike truth shows up. And it shows up for a cleansing and a clearing. You can think about all of the video that is showing up that we see now, what's been hidden in plain sight, the targeting of black men in particular by police forces all over the United States, right? Laid bare, right? Laid bare for us to see. Hard to deny anymore that there is a pattern. Yeah, at work. Hard to contradict that. It doesn't come up for blame. It doesn't come up so we start a fight. It doesn't come up so we get really, really angry. It comes up for a cleansing, right? Now we see, there's a lot of separation playing out here in this, and we see it all of the time, right? We see it all of the time. Think of all of the revelations of this election. Anything unlike love, anything unlike beauty, anything unlike oneness, right? It's really being laid bare. It's really showing up, right? And we're seeing it. And we get to see it now. We get to see it as spiritual people, as people who are on a different path, yeah? As people who are here to anchor peace on earth, as people who are here to anchor love as our lives, as people who are here to live from our soul purpose. So these masks that we wear. We get to throw them off. We get to throw them off because they're not the truth of us, because they're lies and disguises that really hide the very light that we are. We are the light of the world. We are the light of God here on earth, to shine it as ourselves, and to shine it in the way that only we can do it. Each of us has a unique light to shine of that one life. Each of us is here for a purpose. We could not be whole without each of us. We could not be complete if each of us did not show up as our true selves. And so our lives as the life of God are crucial. There's a certain kind of courage that we require, and hey, lucky, we have it. It's already been given. It's ours. It's the courage to shine our lights, to be our authentic selves, to show ourselves, to be transparencies for the light of God, to be unruly, to be ungovernable, to be less controllable, right? It takes a certain kind of courage to do that, but we have it. It's ours also by divine design. And so I'm so happy to just be here on the eve of Halloween. when people say, and it's true, I think that the veil is thin. When the Celts had their first celebrated Halloween, or Samhain it was called, if I'm saying that correctly, they wore masks because the veil is thin and they didn't want evil spirits to find them, right? So it was to hide a true identity. It was to be disguised so that they wouldn't be found by evil spirits. Now, in our teaching, when we say the veil is thin, it's not about a fear of evil spirits. It's an awareness that we are multidimensional beings, that we were so much more than these physical beings, that we are existing in so many planes, and this thing we call the separation between life and death is actually just made up. That one life continues. And so that veil is thin means we have access, greater access to universal wisdom and a universal knowing about our authentic selves. Fear not. All will be revealed. Thank you so much.